What if one single act meant to save the universe accidentally created its most dangerous future enemy? When I rewatched Avengers Endgame, something about the 1970 time travel sequence refused to leave my mind. That moment felt too important, too clean, too perfect for a universe that thrives on consequences. Steve Rogers and Tony Stark weren't just stealing an Infinity Stone. They were stepping into a moment that had already shaped decades of secret history. Camp Lehigh wasn't just a backdrop. It was a pressure point in time. I kept asking myself why the camera lingered so long on the past, why Howard Stark's work felt unfinished, and why the film never showed us the full scope of what was happening behind those walls. Marvel loves hidden origins, and sometimes the most important births aren't shown with fireworks, but with silence. Because in that silence, I believe something else was born. Not a hero, not a villain yet, but a fracture. And once you see that fracture, you can't unsee the shape it eventually becomes. In 1970, when Steve and Tony arrive at Camp Lehigh, the film shows us a simplified version of history. Howard Stark working late, scientists walking around, guards doing their rounds. But simplicity in the MCU is almost always an illusion. Howard Stark was never the kind of man who worked alone. Every major leap in technology within Marvel has always come from collaboration, rivalry, or both. While Howard focused on engineering, structure, and application, someone else had to be pushing deeper questions. Questions about energy stability. Questions about cosmic resonance. Questions about what happens when power doesn't belong entirely to one universe. That's where my theory begins to breathe. Because the Tesseract wasn't new in 1970. It had already been misused, weaponized, and disturbed. Hydra's experiments. The Red Skull's disappearance. Each interaction left fingerprints on its energy signature. So when Tony casually grabs it during the heist, he doesn't just move an object. He changes its state. He alters its balance. And the scariest part is that no one in that moment realizes it. Not Steve. Not Tony. Not even the audience. History appears to continue normally, but something vital is already misaligned beneath the surface. Here's where I want you to imagine a room Marvel never showed us. A secondary lab. Dim lights. Chalkboards filled with equations that don't just describe space, but reality itself. In that room stands a man the MCU hasn't introduced yet, but comic readers know all too well. Victor Von Doom. Not a villain yet, just Victor. A theoretical physicist obsessed with patterns beyond time. While Howard Stark builds machines, Victor studies consequences. He isn't interested in what the Tesseract can power. He's interested in what it can break. Multiversal echoes, identity distortion, energy memory. This is the kind of mind that would notice something is wrong the moment Tony removes the Tesseract from its place in time. Even if Victor doesn't see the act itself, he would feel the aftermath in the data. Numbers no longer behaving. Energy waves repeating unfamiliar signatures. A cosmic object behaving like it remembers being touched by someone else. And that someone else is Tony Stark. The universe registers genius the same way it registers trauma. It leaves an imprint. Victor's role in this story matters because he understands something Howard doesn't yet. The Tesseract isn't just a power source. It's a recorder. And once recorded, it never truly resets. No matter how carefully Steve Rogers thinks he's fixing the timeline later. When Steve eventually returns the Tesseract to 1970, the mission is technically successful. The timeline stabilizes on paper. But reality doesn't run on paper. It runs on condition. And the condition of the Tesseract has already changed. This is where the tragedy locks into place. Howard and Victor proceed with their planned experiment, trusting calculations refined since the 1940s. Everything should work. The chamber seals. The energy rises. For a moment, it probably feels like history is finally aligning. Then the Tesseract refuses to obey. Its energy pattern fractures. A quantum feedback loop ignites. And in that instant, all the invisible consequences crash into the physical world. The blast isn't just explosive, it's transformative. The facility collapses inward. Howard survives, shielded by distance and machinery. Victor doesn't. The energy doesn't kill him outright. It does something worse. It fuses with him. His skin burns, but his cells adapt. His face scars, but his mind sharpens. Pain becomes permanent. And the government does what governments always do in the MCU when something goes wrong. They erase it. Classified files. A failed experiment. A failed scientist. Victor Von Doom officially disappears from history. But survival mixed with cosmic energy doesn't create silence. It creates focus. This is the moment where the birth truly happens. Not with a name, not with armor, but with understanding. Victor realizes the experiment didn't fail naturally. It was interfered with. The data points back to the Tesseract's altered state, back to a foreign quantum signature layered into its energy. Tony Stark's. Victor doesn't know Tony personally, but genius recognizes genius across time. And then there's Steve Rogers, returning the stone like a patch over a bullet hole, pretending balance has been restored. To Victor, this isn't heroism. It's negligence, wrapped in righteousness. His body is ruined, his career erased, his pain eternal. And all of it traces back to two men celebrated as saviors. This is where resentment begins to crystallize into ideology. Victor stops believing in accidents. He starts believing in authorship. Someone wrote this outcome. Someone else walked away from it. The mask he will one day wear isn't about hiding. It's about control. About choosing what the world gets to see. Because the world already chose to look away from him once. There's another layer here that chills me every time I think about it. The Tesseract is the space stone. But space in Marvel isn't just distance. It's identity, matter, position in reality. During the explosion, Tony Stark's quantum imprint, already embedded in the stone, transfers into Victor's cellular structure. Not fully, not cleanly, just enough to matter. As Victor heals over time, his regeneration doesn't restore what he was. It reshapes him. His facial structure subtly echoes Tony's. Not identical, but familiar. Two geniuses. Two paths. One celebrated. One condemned. This isn't coincidence. It's narrative symmetry. The MCU loves mirroring heroes and villains as reflections of the same potential. Victor and Tony become two outcomes of the same archetype. One protected by legacy. One destroyed by it. That's why Doom's hatred of the Stark name feels so personal in this theory. It's not jealousy. It's recognition. Every time Victor looks in the mirror, he sees the shadow of the man who unknowingly authored his suffering. And that kind of connection doesn't fade. It waits, it grows, and it plans. From the outside, history moves on. Howard Stark continues his work. S.H.I.E.L.D. evolves. The Avengers eventually assemble. No one speaks Victor's name. But absence doesn't mean erasure. Victor survives, recovers, and retreats from the world that failed him. This is where the seeds of Latveria quietly take root, though the MCU hasn't shown it yet. A place where Victor can rebuild without oversight, where technology and cosmic understanding merge, where magic will later enter the equation not as contradiction, but as completion. Because once you've seen the universe tear itself open, you stop drawing lines between science and sorcery. You only care about mastery. And Victor Doom becomes obsessed with one idea above all else: control without chaos, order without heroes. A world that doesn't rely on men who break reality and call it saving. Every calculation he runs, every suit he designs, every system he builds traces back to that single moment in 1970, a moment the Avengers barely remember. What makes this theory feel so dangerous to me is how perfectly it fits the MCU's pattern of delayed consequences. We've seen it before. Red Skull touched the Tesseract and vanished. The energy never simply disappears. It relocates. It reshapes. Victor's transformation isn't just physical. It's philosophical. He stops believing in timelines that magically correct themselves. He believes in scars, in permanent marks, in debts that remain unpaid no matter how many stones you return. And when you think about it that way, Doom doesn't see himself as a villain. He sees himself as balance finally being enforced. The Avengers saved everyone else. No one saved him. That asymmetry becomes his justification. And if the MCU brings him in with this origin, it reframes everything we think we know about responsibility in superhero storytelling. Because suddenly the greatest threat isn't an alien invasion or a mad titan. It's consequence. Long delayed, deeply personal, and entirely human at its core. I want you to sit with that idea for a moment. That while the Avengers were celebrating survival, while the universe was stitching itself back together, one man was learning how to hate with precision. Not explosive rage, calculated resentment. The kind that waits decades if it has to. This is why I believe Doom isn't just another villain waiting his turn. He's a correction. A response written by time itself. Born not from ambition, but from damage. And the most haunting part is that none of it required malice from Steve Rogers or Tony Stark. Just blindness. Just confidence that returning what was taken meant restoring what was lost. Victor Von Doom is the proof that some things don't go back. They evolve. They harden. And when they return, they do so with memory. Memory of pain. Memory of names. Memory of the moment everything broke, while the world wasn't looking. The story doesn't end with Victor surviving the blast. That was only the moment his isolation began. What truly shapes him is what comes after, when the world moves on without even noticing what it has done. Governments bury the incident under layers of classification, and Howard Stark, whether out of guilt or fear, never speaks of his former colleague again. To history, Victor Von Doom becomes a footnote, a failed scientist lost to an experiment gone wrong. But to Victor, that silence is louder than the explosion itself. Because in that silence, he realizes something fundamental about heroes and institutions alike. They only acknowledge consequences when they can be fixed cleanly. His pain is messy. His survival is inconvenient. So it's easier to erase him than to confront the truth. Victor doesn't scream or lash out immediately. He observes. He studies the pattern of how power protects itself. This is where Doom's patience is forged. Not the patience of a monk, but of a strategist who understands that the world rewards those who wait for the right moment to act. As Victor rebuilds himself physically, his mind begins to reorganize reality. The Tesseract's energy inside him never settles. It hums like a constant reminder that he is no longer fully human in the way he once was. Space bends subtly around him. Machines respond differently when he touches them. Equations that once seemed abstract now feel intuitive, almost obvious. This isn't madness. It's clarity. Victor understands that the universe runs on systems, and systems can be mastered. He studies every scrap of data he can steal about the Avengers' future exploits, piecing together how often reality bends around them and how casually they accept that bending as necessary. Iron Man becomes a focal point in Victor's research, not because of jealousy, but because Tony Stark represents unchecked intervention. Tony breaks things and then builds faster than the consequences can catch up. Victor, by contrast, wants a world where consequences are anticipated, controlled, and eliminated before they become tragedies. This philosophical divide is where Doom truly emerges. He isn't driven by chaos. He's driven by order taken to its absolute extreme. Latveria, in this theory, doesn't rise through conquest, but through necessity. Victor needs a place beyond the reach of organizations like S.H.I.E.L.D., a nation small enough to reshape, but strong enough to defend itself. He uses his intellect and newly gained abilities to stabilize the region, bringing infrastructure, security, and prosperity in exchange for loyalty. To the outside world, Latveria becomes an anomaly, technologically advanced, fiercely independent, and ruled by a masked figure who never shows his face. Doom's armor isn't just protection, it's a symbol. A rejection of the idea that leaders must be relatable to be effective. Victor believes humanity has outgrown symbolic heroes with colorful suits and catchphrases. He sees himself as a necessary evolution. Where Tony Stark uses technology to express individuality, Doom uses it to erase vulnerability. Where Steve Rogers embodies moral absolutism, Doom embraces moral calculation. Every choice weighed, every sacrifice accounted for. In his mind, this makes him superior, not monstrous. The connection between Doom and Captain America runs deeper than anger. Steve represents faith in systems that Victor knows are flawed. Steve believes timelines can be fixed, mistakes undone, and balance restored through goodwill. Victor has lived the proof that this isn't always true. His body is the evidence. His scars are permanent variables in an equation Steve never bothered to solve. Doom's resentment towards Steve is quieter than his hatred of Stark, but it's more ideological. He sees Steve as the embodiment of a dangerous myth. That righteous intent excuses collateral damage. And Doom intends to dismantle that myth piece by piece. Not through speeches, but through outcomes. Through a world that functions better under his rule than it ever did under the Avengers' protection. The most unsettling part of this theory is how Doom views the multiverse. Where others see infinite possibility, Victor sees infinite instability. Every branching timeline is another chance for suffering to repeat itself. Another Victor to be broken. Another civilization erased by heroes playing gods. Doom's eventual interest in magic isn't a contradiction of his scientific roots, it's a logical expansion. Magic in Marvel is just another system. Another layer of reality with rules that can be learned and exploited. By mastering both science and sorcery, Doom positions himself above the Avengers, who tend to specialize and rely on teamwork to cover their weaknesses. Doom eliminates weaknesses instead. This is why he's so dangerous. Not because he's stronger than everyone else, but because he's more complete. He doesn't need a team to balance him out. He is the balance. At least in his own mind. When Tony Stark eventually sacrifices himself, Doom doesn't feel relief. He feels confirmation. Tony dies fixing a problem he helped create, once again leaving behind a trail of damage no one else will ever fully account for. Doom sees the universe mourn Tony as a hero while never acknowledging the unseen victims of his brilliance. That hypocrisy hardens Doom's resolve. In a twisted way, Tony's death cements Doom's ideology. Heroes are temporary. Systems endure. Doom isn't interested in revenge anymore. He's interested in replacement. He wants a world that doesn't need Avengers because it never allows threats to grow large enough to require them. And to build that world, he's willing to become the villain history will remember. Because history, unlike people, can be rewritten. This is where the MCU's future could take a terrifying turn. Doom doesn't attack openly at first. He lets the cracks widen on their own. Political unrest, technological dependence, multiversal incursions that expose how fragile reality truly is. Each crisis reinforces his argument that centralized, controlled power is safer than scattered heroism. When Doom finally steps into the global spotlight, it won't be as a conqueror, but as a solution. A ruler who already solved problems the Avengers couldn't. And that's when the real conflict begins. Because how do you fight someone whose methods work? How do you oppose a villain who can point to a stable nation and say, this is what order looks like? The final tragedy of this theory is that Doom is right about one thing. The Avengers did save the timeline. They did restore balance. But they also proved that even perfect intentions can leave irreversible damage. Victor Von Doom is that damage given form. A living consequence born from a moment of heroic overconfidence. When he finally confronts the legacy of Stark and Rogers, it won't be with rage-filled monologues or mindless destruction. It will be with calm certainty, with data, with results. He will force the world to choose between flawed heroes and a flawless tyrant. And that choice won't be easy. Because in the end, Doom isn't asking to be loved. He's asking to be acknowledged. Acknowledged as the price of salvation. The shadow cast by heroism. The proof that every saved universe creates a debt somewhere else. The Avengers thought they closed the book on time itself. They didn't realize they were only writing the first chapter of a far more personal war. And that's why this theory chills me. Because it reframes the MCU's greatest victory as the origin of its greatest threat. The Avengers saved everyone else. But in doing so, they created someone who will never forget what it cost him. Dr. Doom isn't coming to destroy the world. He's coming to correct it. If this theory made you see the MCU differently, if it made you question the cost of heroism and the silence around its victims, then you already understand why Doom is inevitable. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more deep Marvel breakdowns like this.